What did Solomon do after finishing building the temple and his palace? This is the question we seek to answer today as we continue our verse-by-verse study of the book of 2 Chronicles on walking through the Bible.
The glory of his cross.
Today we're going to be discussing 2 Chronicles chapters 8, verses 1 to 10. But before we do that, let's read the passage. If you have a Bible with you, turn to 2 Chronicles chapter 8, verse 1. But if you don't have a Bible, don't worry, just follow along with us on the screen. The version that we'll be reading from is the New King James Version. So 2 Chronicles chapter 8, beginning at verse 1. It came to pass at the end of 20 years, when Solomon had built the house of the Lord and his own house, that the cities which Hiram had given to Solomon, Solomon built them, and he settled the children of Israel there. And Solomon went to Hamath, Zobah, and seized it. He also built Tadmor in the wilderness, and all the storage cities which he built in Hamath. He built Upper Bethoron and Lower Bethoron, fortified cities with walls, gates, and bars. Also Baalath, and all the storage cities that Solomon had, and all the chariot cities, and the cities of the cavalry, and all that Solomon desired to build in Jerusalem, in Lebanon, and in all the land of his dominion. All the people who were left of the Hittites, Amorites, Perizzites, Hivites, and Jebusites, who were not of Israel, that is, their descendants who were left in the land after them, whom the children of Israel did not destroy. From these Solomon raised forced labor, as it is this day. But Solomon did not make the children of Israel servants for his work. Some were men of war, captains of his officers, captains of his chariots and his cavalry, and others were chiefs of the officials of King Solomon, 250 who ruled over the people. The temple has now been finished and dedicated. The Lord has appeared to Solomon a second time, telling Solomon that he would indeed hear the prayers of his people made before this temple, and would forgive them of their sins if they repented of them. And he also told Solomon that if he would serve God faithfully, there wouldn't fail to be a king to sit on his throne. But if he went off and served idols, that promise would be set aside, showing us that it was conditional. And of course, as we know, Solomon did go and serve idols, and God was true to his word, in that the kingdom was split in two, and eventually Israel and Judah would be taken off into captivity. Coming to chapter 8, and we find a time mark given to us at the end of 20 years. The 20 years being discussed is the time it took to build the temple and Solomon's palace. From our study of 1 Kings, we find that it took 7 years for Solomon to build the temple, and an additional 13 years to build Solomon's palace, for it was a grand structure too. Solomon's palace was situated right next to the temple, and thus the king would have been able to see the temple from his windows and even pray there if he wanted. Up on the screen now is a picture of Jerusalem in the days of Solomon. The city of David was the part that sits within the city walls outlined in red, but to the south of the horizontal red line. That's the city before the temple was built. However, when David bought Ornan's threshing floor, he gained possession of land north of the city walls. Solomon thus expanded the walls of Jerusalem, built the temple at the top of the hill, as well as his palace and other buildings to the temple's south, but to the north of the city of David. This expansion would allow the city of Jerusalem to grow, and grow it would, where in the days of Hezekiah, the city would expand further west as well. But for now, just noting that the city was growing is good for us to realize, for a growing capital means a strong kingdom. With us being told, though, that 20 years had passed, we can also pinpoint the year of Solomon's reign. For 1 Kings 6 verse 1 said that Solomon began the temple in the 4th year of his reign, meaning that this now would be the beginning in the 24th year of his reign. What we find here is that Solomon was beginning to settle Israelites in cities that David captured in the far north, in what would have been Syria at that time, as well as fortifying other cities in Israel, such as in the upper and lower Bethoron region, which is in the area where the tribes of Ephraim, Dan, and Benjamin meet. All of these actions would show a king who was very powerful and very wealthy, and it would also show us a king whom God was blessing, and a God who kept his promises. Remember, for Israel, if God was with Israel, Israel would be great and powerful. But when God wasn't with Israel, the surrounding nations would come in and oppress Israel. At this point in Solomon's reign, the Lord was with Solomon, so Solomon could expand the kingdom. Now, yes, David had already obtained these lands, but by settling Israelites there, Solomon was gaining more control of these cities for himself. And of course, in so doing, God was also fulfilling God's promise to Abraham. For God didn't merely promise Abraham that his seed would control land from the river Euphrates to the river of Egypt, but that they would live in it. Well, this is the fulfillment of that promise. It would be short-lived, yes, due to Israel's sin, but it was fulfilled nonetheless. All of this building, though, would require workers. Now, Solomon could have forced poor Israelites into the labor force, or even any Israelite into the labor force for that matter, but he didn't. He created forced labor from some of the peoples that remained in the land that Israel didn't expel in the conquest almost 450 years previous, those from the Hittites, Amorites, Perizzites, Hivites, and Jebusites. Now, as we'll point out in passing, that just as we did in 1 Kings, the Bible is not telling us of the righteousness or wrongness of Solomon's actions here. It is simply telling us of his actions, and so that's the only comment we'll make on it as well. We'll continue with chapter 8, Lord willing, in the next lesson. With that, our time is up for today. The Lord willing, we hope you'll join us for tomorrow's discussion of 2 Chronicles chapter 8, verses 11 to 18, as we continue our walk through the Bible, one verse at a time.
Thank you for watching today's episode. We hope that you found it edifying and ask that you not only subscribe to our channel and podcast, but that you like and share this episode among your friends, so that the saving gospel of Jesus Christ can go out to the whole world.